Jake's lips were wet, and his eyes were glazed over in a passionate haze. I wondered for a second if he'd heard me until he finally nodded and crawled back up my body. He held himself above me, staring intently before plunging his tongue deep inside my mouth. Tasting myself on his lips was intoxicating. Our tongues dueled frantically in a strangely fluid dance. Jake curled his arms under me and rolled, taking me with him so I lay on top. "My turn," I said breathlessly as I pushed myself up with my hands splayed over his chest. Jake crossed his hands behind his neck in a supremely relaxed fashion. I tweaked his nipples and then sucked the right one, twirling my tongue and nipping playfully before doing the same to the other. I grinned at his moan of pleasure and continued exploring the contours of his chest, licking a sensual trail along his highly defined abs before moving lower still. I breathed in his delicious masculine scent as I flicked my tongue over the head and then flattened it to lick a long line from the tip to the base of his dick. His hands covered my head immediately. I gave a soft chuckle and sucked one of his balls into my mouth, then the other while I stroked the smooth skin of his beautiful cock. He massaged the back of my neck in an insistent manner, wordlessly urging me to keep going or do something more. I studied him for a moment. I loved that he kept his pubic hair neatly trimmed. I'd always been fanatical about it myself, but it wasn't something he'd bothered with many years ago. I licked him again, changing the angle, and when he pushed me down and lifted his hips, I opened my mouth to suck as much of his gorgeous dick as possible. I nearly choked on his girth. Our cocks were nearly the same length, but he was definitely thicker than me. Jake moaned and writhed in ecstasy as I quickened my pace, sucking furiously and hollowing my cheeks. I was as driven by his greedy cries for more and harder baby as I was by my own desire. Jake stopped my frenzied motion by laying his hand on my forehead. "I'm close. Stop." I released his cock with a popping noise and shook my head. No stopping." "Fuck, Brad." He threw his head back as I recaptured him in a single swoop. I sucked at him hungrily and reached for his balls. He jutted his hips and held my head still to fuck wantonly into my mouth. "I'm gonna come, Brad." He pushed me back and shook wildly as cum shot across his lower abdomen. He took over, stroking himself, trembling as he milked his spent penis. God, he was shamelessly beautiful. All I could think was, I wanted some. I wrapped my hand around his and stuck out my tongue to gently lick and taste him. He flinched at the unexpected sensation of me sucking his spent dick, but he didn't pull me away. When I looked up, I found him staring at me with wonderment and adoration. "You are unbelievable. So fucking gorgeous. Come here. Let me take care of you." His voice was heavy with lust and need as he pulled me up to lay beside him. "I'm so close," I assured him as I planted my feet on the bed and bent my knees. I held myself in a firm, almost punishing grip as I stroked my aching dick. No, I said let me do it. Here, lick my fingers. More. Good boy." Jake pushed 2 digits in my mouth before settling between my splayed legs on his knees to take over, jacking me off with his left hand. Then he placed the saliva-slicked fingers at my opening and rubbed gently at the sensitive skin. The effect was instantaneous. I flew apart, digging my heels into the mattress as my orgasm washed over me. I was left shaking and breathless in the aftermath, too dizzy to begin to process what we'd done. All I knew was I'd really, really liked it. I was blissfully sated, and my eyes were heavy with a combination of confusion, exhaustion, and tequila. I glanced at Jake to gauge his mood. He turned on his side and softly traced my cheekbones and jaw. He opened his mouth as though he were about to speak, but smiled gently instead and tugged me into his arms, cradling my head on his chest. I wasn't a nighttime cuddler. I liked my space, and even when I shared a bed with a lover, there was an invisible line delineating my side from his. Call it a quirk or a facet of the real me. Either way, keep to your side. I pulled back and gave Jake a tired smile with my eyes half closed. Good night. Come back. Just for a little while. I started to protest, but frankly, I didn't have it in me. He looked so delicious and inviting. I figured I'd placate him for a few minutes, then roll back over to my side. I was too tired to argue anyway. I fell asleep immediately and was only slightly aware of being gently pushed back onto my pillow in the dead of night. I registered the familiar sound of a door being opened and closed. He was leaving, of course. I guessed there was a chance I'd dream about him when he left, as though my mind was trying to make sense of the collision of past and present. It was dark, and he was standing outside my window waiting for me to let him in. But when I opened it and invited him inside, he wouldn't come. It was an odd dream that always left me feeling empty. This time it left me awake with a memory I hadn't dared let myself enjoy in over a decade. It was January, and school had finally resumed after a 2-week break. Jake and I hadn't been able to spend much time together during the holidays, and in my teenage head, our separation spelled doom. I was sure things would be awkward. We had nothing to talk about, and the dreaded winter formal dance was coming up at the end of the month. It was the horrible kind the girls had to ask the boys to, which meant I usually got roped into going too. I knew he was going to go with Kara Warren, and I was sick to my stomach knowing I'd see them together. My insecurity, combined with little contact over the holiday, made me a wreck. I figured it was over. The studying and make-out sessions, or whatever it was Jake and I were doing. I told him so when he came over to drop off science notes that night. He wouldn't hear of it. Please, Brant, I missed you so much. I don't want anything to change with us. I didn't either. When we fell onto my twin bed, the connection between us felt more passionate than ever before. Deep kisses quickly turned erotic, and the sensation of grinding against one another fully clothed simply wasn't enough. We removed our shirts, reveling blissfully in the touch of our bare chests. Soon, that wasn't enough either. We took off our jeans, and yeah, that was a hell of a lot better. But when Jake's hand slipped under my briefs to gently touch the head of my swollen cock, well, that was even better. I tried hard to keep my excitement under control, but I wanted us both naked as fast as possible. We soon were. Mara must have heard us. How could she not? We were two 17-year-old, hormonally charged gay boys. I was never the silent type, so there was no doubt I moaned a little too loud when he came all over my stomach, clutching me tightly as he shook with his release. I was a moment behind him. We laid there for a long while, torn between surprise at how fucking fantastic it felt, and overwhelmed by the powerful experience. It felt bigger than us, significant. However, when he dressed and gathered his belongings to leave, I just remember feeling alone. Very alone. Six. An incessant knocking woke me up a few hours later. I blinked and opened my eyes, then slowly let them drift shut in the quiet until another round of banging began. What the hell? I threw on a pair of blue and white striped PJs and humongous t-shirt with Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street on the front as I scurried to answer the door. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and nearly walked into a wall as I checked the time. It was 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, the only day of the week I could rightfully lie in bed till noon if I chose. I glanced through the peephole so I'd know who to yell at. It was Jake and Mac. I squinted in confusion for half a second before unlocking the door and opening it halfway. Jake's generous smile lit his handsome face, and as the memory of last night flooded through my pre-caffeinated tequila fuzzy brain, I gulped audibly. Oh, shit. What? It's early and...
Dressed and ready to go, I see. I told you, Mac. I had a feeling this guy would sleep in and forget all about us.
I had no idea what he was talking about. I shook my head tiredly as I let them inside. My head throbbed ominously. I need coffee.
This is for you. Get ready. We'll get you more at brunch.
He kissed my forehead quickly and moved into the living room. Brunch? What?
I should be offended, but I'll let it slide. Remember, we made a date for brunch yesterday? Go on. I'll take Mac outside while you get ready.
My eyes narrowed suspiciously. I was in no shape to argue, yet. Aspirin, shower, and coffee first. Then, there was no way to avoid the awkward. I'd slept with an ex. It was going to be a bizarre morning. Jake made idle chit-chat as he navigated toward the bistro I suggested on Fairfax and 3rd Street. I wasn't myself yet. My stomach was slightly off, and my headache hadn't budged. Plus, it was painfully obvious Jake's chatter and my quiet were the result of nerves. I smiled weakly at his attempt to weave Mac into his conversation. He was blatantly using the poor, unsuspecting dog as a go-between. It was oddly sweet, but I was at a loss. I wasn't sure why we were having brunch in the first place. It seemed contrived. I wished I were back in bed, buried under my covers. Jan's Cafe was a trendy breakfast and lunch spot located down the street from the Grove, an outdoor shopping mall, and the adjacent farmers market. Both were popular tourist destinations and were infamously busy on the weekends. As obnoxiously congested as the area was, I'd chosen it with a purpose. I needed the comfort of being in a crowd. I didn't want this to resemble a date in any way. Jake handed his keys to the attendant and gave me a funny look.
You know you're in L.A. when you valet your car for breakfast.
It's better to valet than get frustrated looking for a place to park. Trust me. Besides, the breakfast menu is divine. I said, trying to infuse my voice with a little pep to shake off the clumsy aura surrounding us.
I'm sure.
We gave our name to the host and miraculously found a vacant bench to wait out the 45 minutes until a table was free.
Stay with Mac, and I'll grab more coffee from inside.
Jake handed me the leash, gently squeezing my shoulder before he walked away. I studied his retreating figure. He looked very handsome in his light blue collared shirt and slim-fitted khaki shorts. The classic dark Ray-Ban sunglasses gave him a sexy edge. I glanced down at Mac and chuckled at his perked-up ears. What is he up to, Mac? I scratched his ears, loving his soulful expression. I ran my hands over his head, taking comfort in his presence while I watched the sidewalk traffic and waited for Jake. It was as crowded as I'd hoped. There was a woman in her mid-50s with a Botox, wrinkle-free face perched on the end of our bench. She had a rock on her left hand that had to outweigh a doorknob, and the flourishing gestures she made with her manicured fingers indicated she hoped everyone noticed. I chuckled to myself. People were painfully transparent, attempting to fool Mother Nature with injections and impress the mere mortals you ran across daily with expensive accessories and clothing smacked of desperate narcissism. I looked down at my designer casual wear and realized I shouldn't judge. We were all trying to get by in our own way.
Here you go. Extra large.
I smiled gratefully at Jake as he took his place beside me and handed me the to-go cup.